So 2024 was undoubtedly a big year for me and my watch collection. Not only did I get the final Grail watch, the Breguet Tradition, I started this year off with an unexpected acquisition, a deal I just couldn't pass up, and a new direction of looking at underrated brands, some of which I've already discussed. And the blood in, blood out policy certainly has helped curtail my, my frivolous, out of control nature. 6 on the chopping block from my personal collection. I'm looking to add another 6. So I think I'm going to end the year with basically the same amount, but a much more focused, less obvious choices. Never been actually so happy as I am now with my watch collection journey. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning of the end. This is not including any releases that may come out this year. There's always some, like last year, the Meteorite Dial F77 from Nevada Grenchen. Just saw it, had to have it. That's probably going to happen, unless it's going to be a really boring year. But anyway, let's roll the intro, and then I'm going to get into my wish list or my goals for my collection 2025. Still not in a Jetsons flying car. Oh well. Ugh. I thought he was done watch collecting. Hasn't he seen The Godfather? Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. No wristwatch check needed. I'm still honeymooning the Geo there. Honeymooning the Geo there, yeah. Terrible pun. Actually, can you hear the rotor? It's pretty cool. Okay, so number 1, my first collecting goal for this year is an Omega Seamaster. This year, 2025, is the 30th anniversary that Omega got into bed with Bond, at least in the corporeal form of Pierce. It's an incredibly important watch, full of nostalgia for me.
Prime Minister's talked to Moscow. They're saying it was an accident during a routine training exercise.
Governments change, the lies stay the same.
It not only changed the luxury watch world forever, but inspired my easily impressionable teenage mind to suddenly desire a luxury Swiss diver watch for the first time. I'm not sure if it was the menu system in the N64 game, or seeing 007 being nearly whacked in the most ideal way that I would like to depart this world myself, between the thighs of a really, really bad woman.
I don't need the gun.
That depends on your definition of safe sex.
A few minutes later.
But whatever sorcery it was, it seemed to have worked. And I am going to try and wait to see if Omega released something interesting this year, because based on the 2024 offerings, I'm not exactly holding my breath. Especially when there are so many affordable to service ETA-based late 90s and models from the early 2000s still on the market for quite a reasonable price. They all have that ineffable Proustian spark of Madeleine magic, with the lovable wave-etched dial and very particular understated blue that somehow speaks to the inner, sneeringly cynical Jonathan Meade's sense of Britishness. They never quite got it right again after that. Kind of like the greatest blue watch of all time, the Squale 1521 Azzurro. And spoilers, more on that later. It's so funny how a colour can do that. And while the more modern releases left me uttering the Gen Z-like unimpressed meh of spoilt, overly entitled indifference,
the internet is a completely different culture, isn't it?
Everything here is immediately followed by sarcastic comments and nasty responses.
We're finally where we belong.
there's still time for Omega to do the right thing. Connect all the logical, historical dots of the military Seamasters with a bit of silver screen spy history, and hopefully they make the model that I've been talking about for absolutely donkey's years, a blue version of the Brosnan era reference 2254.50, and hopefully in a grade 5 titanium with the mil-spec sword hands and a wave-etched dial. Talk about lovely jubbly. So my second collecting goal is a Worldtimer. Now, I've loved this complication ever since I fell down the rabbit hole reviewing the Patek, which of course is the most influential and most famous, I would say, implementation of this complication, with the legendary work by the horologist and engineering genius Louis Cotier in the 1930s. But of course, it's been adopted by so many brands, so I'm going to investigate offerings from really entry level, also the mid-range, so to speak, and then kind of cross them off the list and find the right one, hopefully by the end of this year. Now, I've reviewed those costing well over 6 figures from the aforementioned brand, but as discussed recently, I don't really want to have anything to do with Patek unless, of course, it's an ellipse. So I prefer investigating several affordable offerings, that is, not so much insanely high priced, which, let's be honest, is kind of a bit of a vulgar amount of money to spend on one watch, but that's just my own sensibilities. And at the same time, it would perhaps prompt my arm getting hacked off with a machete.
Now stand aside, worthy adversary.
'Tis but a scratch.
A scratch? Your arm's off.
No, it isn't.
Well, what's that then?
But unlike the man-baby baiting nostalgia of the Bond watch, the primary attraction here is actually pure utility of having multiple time zones instantly readable at one time. And if you have not guessed by my name being Tristano G. Veneto, hence TGV, I have family in Italy. Or if you have not deduced by my accent, I also have family in England. In fact, all the way to Scotland too.
That's it. You just reminded me. It's your nasally, prepubescent Harry Potter voice. Every time you speak, it's like dragging my balls across shattered glass.
And with my home being NYC, I've got family dotted from east to west coast of the United States. So like my GMTs, the Worldtimer complication is very useful. And it's crazy to think that in the age of insidious tracking surveillance devices, aka the ironically called smartwatch, the mechanical Worldtimer is still the quickest and easiest way to instantly track time in 24 or more time zones at a quick glance. Sometimes the old ways simply are better. Now, the first one I'm going to investigate is the Frederique Constant here. Now, they very kindly lent me this sample, and I was quite surprised because of my extremely critical video I did exploring, why, or rather, what's wrong with Frederique Constant? A legitimate question. There were so many great comments, so much feedback, so many supporters of Frederique Constant, and a lot of criticism, and constructive criticism. It's funny to think that brands, quite a few brands have blacklisted me for saying less, but it goes to show you how eager Frederique Constant, and this is a credit to them, for still lending me watches to take a look at, still being able to talk about them, and taking it on the chin and actually acting on the information and the feedback that you guys and myself bring to the table. And that's so valuable, and I think it speaks volumes because I want to see them do well. They're a brand that really speaks to me. They're kind of an underdog, and I say that in a good way. FC's classically styled Worldtimer offers Patek sophistication in aesthetics, but with an even more efficient way of selecting the desired time zones via their own proprietary unique mechanism first introduced in 2012. It's niftily adjusted solely via a single crown and not a hidden pusher or secondary button or a second crown, unlike almost every other single rival on the market. This technical world first is manifested in their typical high-end finishing and the quality that they're renowned for, but as always at a tiny fraction of the cost of a Patek, and this makes it a very compelling option. The only thing that's put me off actually pulling the trigger in the past was the size. It's 42 millimeters, but if you look at the lug to lug, it's the same as my Panerai, and also with my aging eyes now I need glasses, maybe 42 millimeters makes sense, but I'm still hoping for a 38 because I think that would be ideal. But yet this is, I'm going to say, the best under $5,000. So this is what all the Worldtimers that I will review this year and possibly even next year will be measured against. Because I think in quality, value, engineering wise, style, all of it, this is the gold standard, under $5,000 at least. Now they do have a sportier version, but the older I get, the more dressier the watches I desire. So I'm gonna go for the classic if I don't find anything better. Let's see how it goes by the end of the year. It kind of goes without saying that my third goal is aspiring to own a British watch at some point. After all, my journey started with my grandfather GHW's Charles Frodsham, an historic British brand that has become somewhat synonymous with my channel. But it being pricelessly sentimental and of course a pocket watch, it's not something I can wear and enjoy every day. Vertex, with their legitimate family history and genuine military legacy, obviously speaks to me, for reasons explored, pun I guess partly intended perhaps, in my recent review. Do check it out if you missed it. Then there's always Christopher Ward, with their Meraviglioso Bel Canto. Being a bit of an opera fan and it having an aesthetic similar to my Breguet tradition, but modernized in a kind of sporty Richard Rogers-esque platform, I can't deny I do stalk them on eBay, with my cursor tentatively hovering above that Buy It Now button more than I'd like. But unfortunately, this watch has become the darling of the hipsters that annoyingly gatekeep the hobby in the upper echelons of the very incestuous watch industry media. Now, if you saw my recent Geo unboxing and you followed the channel long enough, you'll know that I tend to be the contrarian. When something gets overhyped, I like to go the other way. But this is just perception. And at the end of the day, who cares what others think? That is the main mantra of the channel since day one. But there's a deeper issue at play here. While I greatly admire the lengths and achievements undertaken in creating the Bel Canto with bespoke parts manufactured at various different specialists, I can't help but think of the servicing nightmare it will be, especially when you consider it will take anything up to a year to get one in the first place, as a friend of mine can personally attest to. Okay, so look at it like this, right? And this isn't a brag. This is purely to contextualize and give you an example, right? I've designed or co-designed dozens of watches now. I know the procedure. I know abundantly all too well. Even with the most rudimentary design, there are multiple supply chains. It gets tricky. I can only imagine with the Bel Canto, with all these specialized bespoke parts from here, there and everywhere, what a logistical nightmare it must be. And it's an unproven movement. Consider this, like 10 years time when it's chimed 90,000 times, okay, because I'm gonna definitely have that thing on, you know, unless I'm sleeping, of course. But 10 years from now, what happens? You know, what happens if one of the parts manufacturer goes out of business, or you can't source the parts, you're dependent on Christopher Ward? The longevity of this movement, whenever there's a new movement or a new module or some new development or a new complication that hasn't been tested over long periods of time, there is no proven reliability here. These are uncharted waters. These are all points to consider, and it makes me a little bit trepidatious about, you know, forking out. Essentially, I mean, I paid the same for my Geo Moonphase here, you know, and I know they're backed up by Swatch, and, you know, they got a big factory there, all pretty much done in one place. Now, I stupidly sold my Squale Azzuro 1521 and have rebought it and sold it so many times it's simply embarrassing at this point, and I always end up missing it. Part of the reason is obviously because I've collaborated with them so many times, and the fruits of those collabs remain safely in the bank vault and always lead me to believe, well, why do I need just the standard version? And it's precisely that version that encapsulates an entire part of my life-changing journey, from casual watch fan to full-blown, unadulterated horological puttana. And after thinking about it, I think the higher-end Cosca version is really the only way to go. Still has that stupendo color that makes me think of the Mediterraneo, or the Mediterranean. But as Dee from Hobby of Ours so rightly put,
every time I see this poor watch coming and going in the collection, all I can think of is, he loves me, he loves me not. He loves me, he loves me not. He loves me, he loves me not. Why does he keep selling me? That poor watch.
Do check out Dee's channel. Hilarious stuff. There's a cameo by some interesting celebrities in there. So yeah, it's a reaction to my State of the Collection. He also helps produce my live shows with Mark, which actually brings me on to a great point. My trip to Japan, I talked about it in the past. I wanted to commemorate it with a Grand Seiko. That's no longer happening for the reasons that I discussed in my last live show about Seiko. It's a long story, but I will go to Japan, but not going to get a Grand Seiko just yet. I'm also currently Tudorless, which is a bit surprising after selling my sub and falling out of love with it. So the Pelagos 39 is also up for consideration, and I've discussed that to death. So have a look back at previous videos when I visited the store. And finally, my very last goal for the year, and comes as no surprise as I did include it in my best and worst watches of 2024. Check out that video if you missed it. There is the Bulova Super Seville, Bulova. Now I included the standard or non-limited editions in my lineup, and I actually said these words. Stone dialed release in 2025. I may actually pull the trigger. Can you imagine this with lapis lazuli? Ooh. And sure enough, a few days after publishing that video, I came to find out about the Complecto collab, and one in particular, a Tiger Eye dial with a connection to the 718 number, which of course close to my heart because of my wife, with the same in-house movement in yellow gold tone. I can't deny it's right up my alley, especially as I recently commissioned a new TGV ring, again in Tiger Eye. It's just fortuitous. It's as if the horological gods deemed it so. But that's about it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, especially what you're saving for, what you're hoping to pull the trigger on this year. What are your collecting goals for 2025? Are you growing your collection? Are you purging? Are you finally getting that grail? Or perhaps you got a new grail? Suggestions, feedback, all that good stuff. Oh, and don't forget to like this video. Very important, actually. YouTube shows me which of you likes the video when you comment. So those loyal gentry out there will... I'll prioritize you guys. I do appreciate the support. So the best way is to comment and like the video if you want to see more free and truly independent content. I will catch you in the next one. Onwards and upwards. Thank you so much for watching. Ciao.